Just by way of introduction, my name's Oliver Fay. I'm a technical lead in the threat intelligence team at Context Information Security. What led me to my current position? So my academic background, going back sort of 10 years now, was actually in international relations, and the first job I ever worked was as an intelligence analyst, working for a risk management startup company. And I've worked in a variety of other research and analytical roles since then, but never really with the cybersecurity or IT technical lean on them. Back in 2011, I elected to do a master's degree and ended up writing my dissertation for that on cybersecurity policy. And I came to Context about a year after that as a junior analyst within the targeted attack team with very little understanding of any of the technical aspects of cyber threat intelligence or cybersecurity more generally, and I've effectively been working in mostly technical roles ever since, having done a fairly intensive 6-month upskilling in learning a lot of those technical aspects. In terms of initial advice I give to anyone, cyber threat intelligence is a big discipline. You don't need to pick exactly where you want to be working within the discipline right from the start. You don't need to necessarily decide whether you want to work in a technical role or a more strategic, big picture focused role. Technical upskilling sounds challenging, especially if you've not done a lot of work kind of in the IT space or in the security space beforehand, but it is very attainable. The highest level of technical qualification in IT I had when I first joined Context was actually a GCSE in IT. So when I came in, I only had a very basic understanding of some of those core technical principles. And as long as you can apply yourself to them, it's perfectly possible to upskill and learn the technical side. I think one of the main attractors of my role is that my average working days are anything but. I tend to be quite flexible in what I do, and one of the most enjoyable aspects is the diversity in what I can see myself doing on a day-to-day basis. So some days, quite a lot of time at the moment with the lockdown, things like that, are focused on doing technical research. So tracking activities associated with some of the high priority adversaries that we see threaten a lot of our customer base. Sometimes I'll be providing direct analysis during things like complex incident response engagements, or I might be writing things like playbooks for red team adversary simulation to help them do better jobs of impersonating real life attackers. I find most interesting the variety and complexity. There's nothing more rewarding from my perspective than unpicking something, be it a particular piece of malware or a set of campaign activity that you've been tracking and trying to piece together for a while. It's hugely, hugely rewarding. So really, I wanted to be part of a wider movement to professionalize threat intelligence and help instill a sense of clarity for the customers that we all deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think there are some real challenges in the cyber threat intelligence landscape. There's such a diverse range of offerings within the sector from all sorts of different organizations, but often the nuances between exactly what those might mean to organizations are lost. It makes it difficult for a lot of the organizations we deal with to compare competing services. And we're frequently in situations where we see a company struggling with some of the challenges of understanding exactly what they need to get from cyber threat intelligence, or how to apply it best to make themselves more secure. So I'm a big advocate of promoting particularly technical knowledge, focusing on a lot of the real world adversaries that we find ourselves working with on a day-to-day basis. Also helping organizations to understand how best to defend against some of these particular techniques. I'd also like to use the opportunity to foster some formal and probably some less formal intelligence sharing between the various different providers. We all have different apertures on the world, and we all have sort of different perspectives to look at things from. So having an environment where we can freely share our findings is something that's really valuable. So in terms of resources, I would actually point to the CREST badged CTIPs What is Threat Intelligence and How is it Used PDF that's been released on the CREST website. It gives a really good high-level overview of what threat intelligence is and how it can be utilized, and it's fairly easy reading even for someone who doesn't have a lot of familiarity with it. I especially pinpoint the first two sections in that. So what is cyber threat intelligence and how do organizations use cyber threat intelligence? There's a couple of other sort of standout books or reports that I've read over the last few years that I really encourage people to read. The first of those is The Cuckoo's Egg by Clifford Stoll. Normally it's a novel, but it covers his real-world experiences of investigating some data breaches at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in the US back in the 1980s. Is one of the first ever recordings of investigations into cyber espionage activity. I would also look at Chronicle Security's blog post, which I think was released on Medium, called Who is Gossip Girl? This is basically cyber espionage archaeology that looks at some of the biggest incidents over the last few years, including Stuxnet, and how some of those have been tied together. It's quite technically focused, particularly for people who won't necessarily have that kind of initial technical grounding, but it is absolutely engrossing. In order to understand some more of the process, I would also point people to reading the Central Intelligence Agency's Tradecraft Primer on structured analytic techniques, which sounds kind of boring, but it is actually really, I find, is actually quite an interesting resource for helping people to understand how to go about analyzing things in a structured way. So how technical does someone need to be to work in cyber threat intelligence? The answer is it depends on exactly what you want to be doing within the discipline. I think along with having a good understanding of geopolitics and international relations, you need to understand or hold an understanding of at least the core concepts related to IT. So things like networking, operating systems, basics of cryptography, and then some more focused stuff around adversaries. So things like types of malware and exploit life cycles. And I suggest that people probably want to understand at least one of the common models for representing or explaining adversary activity. So something like the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, the Diamond model for intelligence analysis, or the MITRE ATT&CK framework. That's probably a good baseline for someone who's working or starting a career as an all-source analyst, and a lot of the more technical aspects you probably pick up through exposure. If you want to be working in a more tactically or technically focused role, where your day-to-day might involve things like direct investigation, hands-on keyboards activity, or reverse engineering malicious software, you're probably going to need a higher degree of technical proficiency, but there's a lot of really good resources to help from both the perspective of more academic upskilling and also for people who want to experience some of those as hobbyists. So the three that I'd point to as the top sort of skills or traits would be generally an inquisitive personality, wanting to sort of pick and unravel at things, and then logical reasoning and critical thinking abilities. I'd also add to that things like verbal and written communication. They are really, really important, but the initial three mentioned there will mean that most people with an interest in the discipline should be able to apply themselves as long as they're willing to spend some time building that baseline understanding that I've already mentioned. I think one thing it's important for people to remember, it's often a hard thing for us to do, but people who are looking at cyber threat intelligence really need to come to terms with the fact that they won't know everything, and that predicting the future with perfect accuracy is impossible. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong in this discipline. We all are at various times, and it's really what you learn from that and the processes that surround it and the justification for the judgments you make, which make or break you. What should organizations look for in a CTI provider? It's actually quite a difficult question. I think a CTI provider should be keen to understand the business and operations of organizations that are looking to draw down their services and tailor their approaches to you and help you understand as an organization how to develop your threat intelligence use case. They should be in a position to explain why particular services or deliverables might be more valuable to you than others, which of these are likely to bring about best returns for you as a business, and how to apply the cyber threat intelligence products that they offer in order to understand both things like the large-scale strategic business implications of the actions that you might be taking, or implement technical mitigations or defensive measures against the adversaries who might be covered off. How do I see CTI evolving over the next few years? I really hope that organizations become better at integrating cyber threat intelligence within things like their existing planning and development at all levels, right from the technical up to strategic management. There's a lot that can be drawn on there and helping organizations understanding of how they interact with the world. My main aspect, though, is I really, really aspire for us to see a cascade or a trickle down to some of the really small and up to kind of smallish, medium-sized enterprises. In a day job, we see a lot of sophisticated adversaries leveraging things like nation-state level capabilities to target quite small organizations, either for the data they hold or for access they might have into other third parties. And these entities are the ones who really struggle to defend themselves against these massively disproportionate capabilities.